Your average, it says, is about 1.5 to 2% return. The concept theoretically means that if you have a $50,000 policy, and over the course of 10 or 15 years within the policy, and you've accumulated, let's say, savings of about $5,000 in the plan, you would think two things would occur here. That the first one, that you now have a $55,000 policy, and that this $5,000 in savings is yours. But you see, insurance has funny banking. Number one, if you died, they would only pay the $50,000. You lose the $5,000. Number two, that if you wanted to borrow or secure the $5,000, you actually have to borrow the money and you have to pay it back. But if it's your money, that should not be the case. Term insurance, though, has a lower premium, and it allows you to what they call invest the difference. So if your term insurance policy was $100 and your whole life policy was $150, the concept is buy term and invest the difference. Now, supposedly their best argument when I've jammed these insurance companies representatives with this issue is that they say, well, I understand that it's not really a good investment tool, but they also say that most African Americans lack the discipline to invest this $50 difference into a mutual fund, common stock, CD, or money market. But you see, two wrongs don't make a right. The lack of discipline by African Americans should not be the rationale to invest in a policy that has a poor rate of return, and secondly, it really is not your money. So we're recommending that you buy term and invest the difference. The next concept we want to look at is accelerated mortgages. We really need to begin to look at the fact that if you buy a $80,000 home with a combination of interest over the course of a 30-year note, you will literally pay $240, 3 to 4 times the cost of the home. Most bankers will now tell you that you have an option of what they call an accelerated mortgage. That you look at your amortization schedule, and let's say in the month of January, with a total mortgage payment of $700, in the initial years, far more interest than principal. So of the $700, let's say $600 was going to interest and $100 was going to principal, and I'm being nice, it really is even greater for interest in those initial years. But to keep the example simple, $600 for interest, $100 for principal. The concept of an accelerated mortgage is that in your January payment, you pay the $700, but you also include the February principal payment. What will happen then is that you will not have to pay the February interest. So in the month of February, you now have dropped down to March, and you're now paying March's principal and interest because you took care of February's principal in your January payment. An accelerated mortgage is one idea. Another one is simply to have a 15-year note. Please don't think that a 15-year note doubles your initial payment from $700 to $1,400. It may go up from $700 to about $850 to $900. And so if your cash flow can allow for that, that also is a much better way of doing that. Or if you simply, from time to time over the course of the year, make just one principal payment or make payments twice a month. The main thing is that if you can pay just a little bit more from time to time, make it a little easier for yourself and on the bank by making a payment equivalent to the principal on the amortization schedule, you literally can save hundreds of thousands of dollars by simply paying an additional $50 to $100 a month in principal. Concept is called an accelerated mortgage. Things that other communities teach their children, and unfortunately does not take place in the African American community. Because our book is titled Black Economics, let's begin to delve in with this concept and what this means. Black economics starts off with, before you buy anything, you ask yourself, can you make it? Secondly, can I barter for it? Is it something that I've made that I can trade with someone else? And we can barter, we can trade. Third, to consider buying it wholesale from a black wholesaler. Fourth, from a white wholesaler. There's a motto in the Jewish community that you never buy retail. Fifth, from a black retailer. And lastly, if this is what you simply have to do, is to buy from a white retailer. Whether it's a white wholesaler or a white retailer or a foreign or non-black wholesaler or retailer, always look for the black representative, the black sales rep, because there's a possibility that even at the white store, you can also give the black employee a commission. Just some things to look at. And then lastly, as it relates to microeconomics, we look at the whole issue of investments. Our desire is that you pay God first. And we recommend what the Bible says, 10%. It's amazing how when people make large amounts of money, they say, well, you know, it was okay paying God 10% when I was making $10 a week in allowance, something like that, so I paid God $1. But you don't understand, Jawanza, now I'm making $30,000, and you're asking me to pay God $3,000? Well, I look at it this way. It's all God's anyway. And you need to be thankful that the Lord has given you the opportunity to keep 90%. All the Lord is asking for is 10%. So we recommend you pay God first. Now, we recommend that based on Scripture. But even in the laws of prosperity, the concept is the more you give, the more it comes back to you. So even for selfish reasons, you need to give to God, because the more you give to God, the more God gives back to you. But again, our fundamental reason is not what you can get from it, but because you love God so much, you want to at least acknowledge that by giving 10%. Secondly, we recommend you pay yourself. You pay yourself second. For many of us, savings is defined as anything that we have left over. In America, the average savings is about 4%. You compare that with Western Europe, with Germany, with Japan, and they're at 15 to 20%, not only as individuals, but also in terms of business for research and development. For many Americans, though, savings is simply whatever we have left over after we spent all of our purchases, those planned and unplanned. We recommend you pay yourself second. You pay God 10%, then you pay yourself a minimum of 10%. But then we have to ask yourself, this savings that you've developed, where is it going to go? Is it going to go into a sock, a shoe, or a can? Now, you may laugh at that, but if you have your money in a checking account, it's very similar to a sock, a shoe, or a can, because you're not earning any interest. For people to have $5,000 and $10,000 in a checking account and not receiving any interest, that's a bad investment strategy. And even in a passbook account, where you're receiving, let's say, 2 to 4% interest, that's a little bit better than a sock, shoe, or a can, but not much. The next area, of course, would be a CD, where you're now being paid 5 or 6%. But at some point, an intelligent African American would have to ask themselves, if the banks are guaranteeing me 2 to 6% in a passbook or CD account, that means they're making 7 to 10 to 12 to 15 to 20% somewhere else. Where is that somewhere else? It's probably in money market. It's probably in mutual fund, or common stock, or in bonds, or real estate, or limited partnership agreements. So we recommend that you begin to place your money there. Now, of course, then we get back to the guarantee. And unfortunately, African Americans operate off the guarantee. Just give me a good job, a good salary. I don't want a commission. There are African Americans, there are individuals in America that would rather have a guaranteed $20,000 than receive 10% off all sales and a limited amount of income. There are African Americans that would rather be guaranteed 2 to 6% in a passbook or CD account versus 12 to 15% somewhere else like mutual fund. Now, you can believe me, when the mutual funds go, so goes your passbook or CD account. I marvel at people that feel they have a greater chance of playing the lottery and winning there than in the mutual fund. So in terms of our hierarchy of investment, we would recommend passbook would be last, then you move into CD, then you move into money market. Pretty much the same return, but the money is liquid and accessible for you to use. Then you move into mutual funds, then you move into bonds, and then you move into common stock and limited partnership agreements and into real estate. Now, many of us were not aware that you can secure a mutual fund for as little as $25 to $30 a month. And it's amazing how we say we don't have $25 or $30 for a mutual fund, but we spend that and more a week in the lottery. And there's a much greater chance that you will develop in a mutual fund over the lottery. I mean, the chances of you winning a lottery are about 1 in 6 million. But if you invest $40 a month for 40 years at a 15% return, then you will accumulate $1 million with just $40 a month. Make that 80, and you can do it in 20 years. Again, these kind of investments that we're talking about, in Black Enterprise, they had an article about the Evans family, a group of family members, only about 10 of them, that put up about $80 a month, $800 in total. They've been doing this over the past 10 years, and they've accumulated assets of about $2.3 million, just one family. But again, in order to do that, we have to trust each other, and we have to also be disciplined. The Bible says in Matthew 25, when he talks about talents, talks about monies, what have you done with what I've given you? It is sad to say, but if a person earns $25,000 a year times 40 years, then that's $1 million that we've accumulated in that period of time. But unfortunately, at the age of 65 years of age, only one of those persons out of 100 will be wealthy. 63 will be dependent. Only 3 will be financially stable. 4 will still be working, and 29 would have died. It shows that many of us have not been good stewards with our money. These are just some of the things we need to look at from a micro perspective. Now let's begin to look at what the race is doing. Look at the larger community. And the first thing we have to look at here is the issue of the number of African Americans starting their businesses. Remember, it's only 9 per 1,000, while with other groups, it's between 64 and 108. We need to also look at the fact that we're spending 90% of our money outside the African American community. Our median income is only 61%, and as a result of that 39% loss between black and white income, we have a $127 billion deficit. Because of discrimination in terms of housing patterns, in terms of appraisals for our property, because of how we invest our money, the average white family has wealth of $39,000. For us, it's only $3,400. We have to look at these macro issues. In addition to that, we have to look at our attitude. See, I still believe that our number one problem is not economics, it's attitude. The Evans family has a proper attitude of trust and economic development, and that's what made them successful. There's a theory called the NAS theory. Niggas ain't, I'm a Christian and so I can't curse. When I was in Baltimore, a black woman told me she needed some sewer work to be done in her basement and called a black man out to bid on a job. And he said it would cost $800. And she said, there's no way I'm going to pay a black man that kind of money to do the work. The next day, she asked a white general contractor to come out, and he bid on the exact same job. And they said it would cost $1,500. And she said yes. The next day, the brother rang the doorbell. And she said, look, I told you you're not doing the work. The brother said, I know. I came out here 2 days ago as a favor to you, and I bid at $800, but I also work for that white general contractor. Now I have to charge you $1,500. That's how sick we are. Many of us do not believe that African Americans can provide a quality product. Now I know we all have been burned one time or another, but let me tell you a secret. White businesses mess up too. And believe me, being an owner of a business, and we do business with both black and white establishments, and we have seen numerous white businesses also make mistakes. But you see, if there's self-hatred, if a white business makes a mistake, then you say Mr. Jones made a mistake, Mr. Williams made a mistake. But unfortunately, if you hate yourself and hate your race, then if African Americans make a mistake, rather than looking at just one individual or one company, we write off the entire race. We have to be very careful about that. That's why I stress in my company, African American Images, that when we ship books out, you represent more than yourself and this company. You represent our entire race. And if we make a mistake, it could very well be the downfall of other businesses, because many black consumers won't have the tolerance to give business to other black establishments. So we have to work on our attitude. Secondly, we need to, as business owners, we need to realize that being the boss does not mean that you are right. See, one of the things I respect about non-black businesses, about foreign businesses, is that they'll say, how you doing, Mr. Jones? How you doing, Mr. Brown? Now they may talk about you and your mama like a dog after you leave their establishment. But while you were in there, they treat you with the utmost respect. Being the boss does not mean that you are always right. It does not mean that you open when you want to open and close when you want to close. Many black consumers have told me that they have problems when the sciences open up at 9 o'clock and they're not there. Supposed to close at 5 o'clock and they're not there. When I'm in the store chewing gum, talking on the telephone. Being boss means you recognize that the customer is always right, even when you're wrong. That's why I have a model, a plaque in our offices that all our employees have to memorize, that we are charged by Christ to serve, motivated by Hopetep and Garvey toward black excellence, all for our customers, who are the most important persons in this business, not the boss, not the employees, the customers. And any business owner that does not recognize that the customer is the ultimate boss is going to go out of business. So not only do we have to work on the self-hatred from the black consumer's perspective, we have to also work on that from the black business owner's perspective as well. There's a typical concept I want to look at here called the four-corner community. On a typical area in the black community, four corners, you probably have a liquor store, a barbecue shop, a storefront church, and probably another liquor store, or in some cases a gas station. But in my example, I want to look at two liquor stores. And they're both selling Wild Irish Rose or Old English 800 for, let's say, $1.50 per bottle. Foreign businesses know that black consumers are geared more toward price than race, that they're loyal more toward price than they are toward helping out other businesses. So the non-black store realizes this. I almost feel these Asians and Arabs must have a horse that they're all given before they leave their home country to take up shop in the black community. So there's a price war, and they lower the price from $1.50 to 99 cents. Now, the first thing the black business owner should have done would have been to call a meeting and to let everybody know there's a price war taking place. They're trying to put me out of business. And remember, black consumer, if I go out of business, I can no longer hire your child. I will not be able to make contributions to your church bulletin, your church annual souvenir booklet. But unfortunately, the black business owner did not call a meeting, and the black consumer did not inquire with the black business owner why their prices were higher. As a result, more and more black consumers purchase from the non-black store. I think you know the scenario. The black store goes out of business. Only one liquor store now on the corner. You can believe me, Old English 800 is not going to remain 99 cents, nor will it go just up to $1.50. It may go to $1.75, may even go to $2. And unfortunately, probably another black store will open up, but did not know what went on, did not read the history books, and the same mistake will be played out over and over and over again. What we've got to do is communicate more with each other, and we have to also see if we can upgrade our consciousness beyond just price and look at investing in ourselves. But there's good news, because even if we cannot compete against Kmart and JCPenney's and Walmart and Venture and other stores that buy in large volumes, research has shown us that African American consumers will support a black business if the quality is there, if the service is there. So while we may not be able to compete on price all the time, we can definitely compete in the area of quality and service. But I always am amazed at black consumers that tell me, I wouldn't mind supporting a brother if he had lower prices or if the prices were the same. So I often ask African American consumers, how much commitment do you have to the race? Is it a penny? Is it a nickel? Or is it a dime? I heard a horror story in Baltimore or on the Eastern Coast somewhere where I was speaking at, where a business owner told me that he was selling an item for $4.99, and another foreigner and a foreigner was selling it for $4.95, and he began to lose sales purely off a 4-cent differential. So I wonder what African American consumers are thinking about when they say, I wouldn't mind supporting a brother if he had lower prices or equal prices. Well, there's no commitment there. You're doing yourself a favor, not the race. So again, we have to raise the question, how committed are you to the race? Can my prices be a penny higher, a nickel, or a dime? Now, I'm not naive. I'm very much aware that in some cases, the prices are much higher than something a penny, a nickel, or a dime. But there are some situations where it's much closer than we recognize, and many of us still would not support the African American business, and we have to work on that. In addition to that, we have to also begin to look at how we can reduce our failure rate, which I pointed out was so high, 30% in 3 years, 50% in 5 years, and about 85% in 10 years. Now, many people would have us to believe that the number one problem with business failure is because of lack of capital, and it is true. There's a great degree of discrimination in terms of banks providing loans for African Americans. Only 10% of African Americans start their business with a loan. And as you know, unfortunately, many of our businesses are undercapitalized. The average black business starts with about $11,000, the average white business at $24,000, and the average Asian business at $28,000. But my research has led me to believe that our number one problem is not the lack of capital, is lack of business acumen. That Asians come over here well educated and have the expertise in business. If African Americans are going to start a business, they cannot start a business purely because they or their mama makes a good sweet potato pie. That is not the only criteria and resource you will need to be effective. Somebody, yes, has to be well accomplished in product development. And it seems to be African Americans have their greatest strength in product development, whether it's cooking or providing a service or making a particular product. But we have to also be strong in the area of accounting and in marketing. A well-developed business has equal strengths in product development, accounting, and marketing. And we have to work in those three areas, which is why I'm concerned about the black brain drain in our community. Those African Americans with the skills, the degrees, are working for IBM and Xerox and the Fortune 500. Those with the guts who don't have the skills over these penny ante businesses. If there was only a way to blend those with the skills and the guts, more of our $360 billion could have remained in the black community. Two areas where I think that we need to look at, which have a much higher success ratio in terms of business stability, are incubators and franchises. The incubator concept is very similar to our African tradition that Julius Nyeri talked about in the program called Ujamaa. You start a business, and rather than having your own rent, your own building by yourself, you simply form a cooperative. You are part of a larger structure. Not everyone does not need to purchase a copier, a computer, a fax machine, and you have access to a travel agent. We can begin to share some of these resources. I know when my business, African American Images, first started, I placed my business within Afro-Am, a sister publishing company. And so we shared resources, and they helped me in those initial years. And so that's an incubator kind of concept. Those businesses that are part of an incubator, their success rate is almost the reverse. Much higher success rate, about 80%. And the same thing applies to franchises, where there's a management team that will help you throughout, but especially in those initial years, and very helpful as it relates to marketing. We need to also look at some of the industries that I think we need to control. Obviously, if you're spending 31% of your, if we have 31% of the industry in terms of hair care and cosmetics, we need to begin to control that. And I commend the American Beauty Aids Institute for trying to have on all their products, so we can compete against Revlon, that if we are spending that kind of money, we need to begin to control that industry. The same thing for sports and for music, for food, for clothing. We need to control those industries. The same thing applies to the church. If our strongest institution is the church, then we don't need churches having 90% of their deposits in white banks, nor 95% of their construction being controlled by white general contractors. So we have to work on that. As much as I'm in favor of self-help and black business development, I am not naive enough to expect that black businesses can put 30 to 40 million African Americans back to work. I think that this is not an either-or issue. It is and this debate needs to stop between the role of the government and the role of the self-help advocates. It needs to be a two-pronged approach. If America can invest in Japan, if America can invest in Poland, in Russia, then America can invest in itself. especially in the people that made this country what it is. Just in the area of reparations alone, there have been calculations that America owes us about $4.1 trillion plus inflation and interest. And there have been presidents that have already been established with Native Americans and with Japanese Americans that were placed in concentration camps during World War II. But we need to look at that. What makes Japan strong? They invest in Japan. What makes America weak? They invest in Japan as well. So we have got to begin to look at the government investing in America to combine with the efforts of self-help. As we begin to wind down, we need to also look at our resources on the continent of Africa. We have a very rich continent with 46 of the major minerals in the world in strong quantities on the continent. The combination of those natural mineral resources along with labor shows a market potential there if African Americans and Africans can work together to build that kind of unity. The same thing that we see in Western Europe with their bloc needs to take place on the continent of Africa, along with emerging the Caribbean into that as well. Before I give my last position to relate economics to self-esteem, on page 116 of the book, we summarize the objectives that we're trying to secure here. Our first desire is that we need to increase the number of businesses. Secondly, we need our talented 10 starting businesses rather than working for the government or the Fortune 500 corporations. Third, we need a community that will encourage entrepreneurship and parents who promote a good business versus a good job to their children. There still seems to be more reference given to he's an accountant, she's an engineer, he's a lawyer versus he or she is an entrepreneur. Fourth, we need African American institutions to emphasize economic over political development. Fifth, we need to resist racism and advocate for governmental assistance. And lastly, we need business owners to provide quality products and service who contribute back to the community because they value liberation, not self-aggrandizement. As we begin to look at our last point, our number one problem has not been economics. Our number one problem has been lack of trust, lack of self-esteem. For example, we've had a theory for years. If 40 million Africans all gave $1, and even the homeless have $1, we'd have $40 million. We have the numbers, we have the money. The question is, who would we trust to hold that kind of money? Number two, under the leadership of Tony Brown and Walter Fauntroy and others, we've recommended if 150 of our largest black organizations choose not to meet our particular year and not give their monies to Master Hyatt and Master Hilton, we would have saved $16 billion in just 1 year alone. But we could then use the following year to build 4 African American regional hotels. The problem is many of those organizations do not want to meet at black colleges. They want to meet with Master Hyatt and Master Hilton. As a result, we are still giving our money to other people while we have conferences talking about what they are doing to us. And the last idea I want to recommend is the concept called Ujamaa. The way the meeting works, everybody comes to the meeting with $100. Secondly, everybody brings a business plan. Third, we all agree whoever has the best business plan will receive all the money. 4, whoever has the best plan has to keep the money inside the group. So they will only work with those people in the group who are attorneys and engineers and marketing people and printing people, where we're keeping all the money inside the room. And lastly, we all become investors or shareholders in everyone's business. In this way, we begin to hold people accountable. But we've got to begin to start more businesses. Now remember, this concept of Ujamaa is based on the idea that whoever has the best plan will receive the money. We're not going to argue on a he said, she said discussion. We agreed up front. Whoever has the best plan will receive the money. We have the theory. Let's begin to put it to work. We need to learn from what happened in Montgomery. That for 355 days we created our own alternative bus company. They did not bring us back because they loved us. They brought us back because they were going out of business. It is not enough to simply have the desire to sit wherever you want to sit. We have to begin to control these bus companies. We now have a degree of political power, but now we need economic power. To have the right to reside at the Holiday Inn and not have the economic resources is a contradiction. Let's get busy.